Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Gap Fillers podcast. This week, I want to discuss Caleb Hammer and his view on veteran disability. So, for those who don't know, Caleb Hammer is a millennial financial podcast commentator, expert. He leads a financial audit podcast and has people come in, and he's kind of like or Gordon Ramsay-esque of where he likes to. Thing of Gordon Ramsay mixed with Dave Ramsey, where he kind of gets the insulting kind of makes him popular, but he has some solid, good financial advice. However, recently or a couple months ago, he made a comment, and it's recently become viral again about disability and the abuse that veterans take advantage of. So in this podcast, I had he basically had two people that one was a veteran, one was getting out. One was a nurse in the Navy, and the other one was still in the Navy as a MP. Now I want to stress this, that speaking as a veteran myself or prior service, as 11 Charlie. A lot of these office jobs are pretty much a joke, especially if you're going to talk about hurting your body. Carrying around 135-pound base plates, 110-pound mortars, and then an additional 70-pound bipod. That's just the system that we would carry around at Fort Bliss, let alone fixing armored vehicles, with the belly plates and all the other stuff, their prop shafts and all those other stuff. So this is really something that got me irritated, that people consistently are trying to take advantage of VA disability. Now, I will also state that I am on I have 20% disability for a pinched nerve on my back / shoulder. However, I do not seek more than that. In fact, if it was to be fixed, I would want it to be canceled. However, it keeps on popping up. Anyways, so, for this commentary, but what actually happens when people take advantage is it makes the entire place look bad. So if you're even associated with disability, it looks bad. If you need it or if you don't need it, if you're a 300-pound woman getting $4,700 a month for disability, then she's making more than I am with my disability on top of a full-time job. Now I will. So let's get into this a little bit. Okay. So as a nurse, you're not carrying a bunch of weight. You're not destroying your body, and it's not some kind of welfare program or some entitlement that you actually are supposed to get. It is actually for veterans with disabilities that will, in particular, prevent them from working full time or certain in certain places. This lady's not working at all, and she's looking to become a nurse practitioner, but it's constantly just milking the system. Now, if you watch the whole episode, if you ever watch a lot of these episodes with Caleb Hammer, they tend to be kind of like easily, low-hanging fruit to mock. But this one, the fact that he kind of is taking a little bit heat from other veterans is something I want to comment on. So I despise people who milk any kind of system. Okay, it's very Machiavellian, and it leads to basically the degradation of society as it is, right? So if you're going to let's take another thing, like let's take food stamps. Why is food stamps there? Well, it's for hardworking people that are just have kids and are barely able to make ends meet. In theory, that's what food stamps are for. However, people overwhelmingly use food stamps when they can afford food they just, they're terrible with finances, and that becomes a big issue. And it makes people who just kind of hit some small hard times, to use food stamps. It makes them all look bad. If a veteran doesn't actually have a disability, them using and milking the system is basically going to degrade the entire disability system. In fact, it was actually it's a common thing in the veteran community, or even in the military, that you're not going to be able to get your VA benefits, right? However, if you know the right things to say, if you know the right combination of words and chronic and all those other stuff, then you can get disability, and that's what she's doing. She's obviously milking the system, and then he's an MP. Okay, I know people who've seen combat that are in for 20 years, not in the Navy, in the Army, were infantry, and barely have any disability. So the idea that, well, you served your country, you should get it. No, that's not what disability is there for. Disability is there for people who have hurt their bodies physically doing in the line of duty. Okay. And that's the biggest problem I have with this, is that it reflects on the entire on everyone that wants to take to utilize the VA in whatever system it is. But we as a society are so concerned about, especially I found this particularly on the right, that the Republicans are so worried about making any kind of derogatory comment towards veterans or towards the military. The idea is that the government, everything that the government touches and functions is absolutely terrible, except for the military, because of reasons. They can't. You won't be able to name the reasons, but it's just as inefficient as any other government program. And then, but it kind of hides behind the romanticized versions of what we have built up in our heads all the way from World War II. It took a big hit during the Vietnam War, gained a little bit back during the Persian Gulf War, and then after 9/11, it really took off and kind of stuck as a main talking point, particularly for the neocons and the right. So the whole point is that Caleb Hammer is right to point out, at the very least, that there are a ton of veterans that are taking full advantage of the system when they don't deserve it. And somebody who's punching numbers at a desk doesn't deserve disability. There. In fact, if it came down to it, I would volunteer. If it came down to me getting rid of my disability for all the pencil pushers to get rid of theirs, I would do it. But that it actually ends up being the prisoner's dilemma at that point, where and that's why everybody takes advantage of the system. Well, get the money while you can. Well, if everybody gets the money but not everybody deserves it, then it's a system that is meant to implode on itself. If I'm going to attack somebody taking full advantage of welfare because they qualify for it, then it should be the same for veterans, whether they are prior service or not. Just because you served in the military doesn't make you moral. It doesn't give you some higher priority of thought. It doesn't make you above a value or above a certain way of thinking. I was about to quote Ben Shapiro, where facts don't care about your feelings, right? It doesn't actually mean what you feel. Somebody, oh well, that feels good, so that's right. No, reality is reality, and people who take advantage of the system should be reformed or destroyed, and that's really what ends up happening. with the government spending the way it is, with the kinds of people who come out of the military. I'm not saying, and I have to caveat this. I feel like, and that's the problem with this kind of thing, is that you have to make a million caveats. I'm not saying that everybody that comes out of the military is bad, and I'm not even saying a majority. However, the problem is that it is a system that can be milked. It is a system that can be taken for granted, and it's a system where evil can hide itself behind a veil of righteousness, and that is what will end up happening with this. And so Caleb Hammer, he doesn't even say that. He doesn't even say that it shouldn't be a thing, but he points out that every veteran that he ever comes across, no matter if they were pencil pushers or grunts, every single one of them has some sort of disability. And that's because the VA is very easy to be manipulated if you say the right words. And the problem is that a lot of the people that go into something like the infantry or a combat arms division, MOS, is they tend to be more down to earth. Well, because they look towards the veterans of Vietnam. They look towards the prior service, or even they even look towards like SF guys, and they don't think that they did enough. And so they're more likely to be like, oh, I don't want to be that guy that takes a spot from the World War II vet. I don't want to take the guy from the Korean vet. I don't want to take it from the Vietnam vet. However, and so I've seen a lot more of those kinds of guys in the combat arms area than I have from the PODs of the finance guys, or who who just name any other MOS that's not combat arms. And that's almost what you get. Is you get these guys that, oh, well, I was in the military, I was in this service, and they end up being, well, they deserve, and I'm not even gonna. I'm gonna get into that a little bit with the homeless veteran situation, and I'm not saying that money should go towards the homeless vet situation. I think that's a totally different problem. I think in fact I think it's actually an underlying of the same problem is when people get out, they have a certain entitlement because of the veil of righteousness that they can hide behind. It's a virtue signal. It's I was a veteran, so what I say means more. It's not true. What I say, I can get around the rules of principles of God and the rules of reality because I have this thing that people look to as good, even if I'm not. And that's what they enter. And in fact, it's very impious that people do that because they'll hide behind this facade of good, and instead of trying, and basically it breeds victimhood mentality. It breeds well, I served the military, therefore I deserve. That's a very entitled way of thinking. I served in the military, therefore I deserve. I am entitled. I hurt my back in the military. Therefore, people need to pity me, and that's not true either. So it's a very Malthusian, and it gets into the ills of society as a whole. So it's kind of like the idea where the money is, people will go to. It's kind of like that idea where and so instead of money being the thing that people received in the military, because frankly the military is very low pay, unless you're going to be in for a decade and a half, and even then people will say it's lower than that. But the idea is that you get a good GI Bill, you get a really good setup to kind of jump off from, However, people waste it, and then they'll hide behind the the society, the army or the military doesn't train us for this certain task. Well, they don't, but they'll give you a 3-year GI Bill. They'll give you, they'll give you certain benefits. They'll give you a VA home loan. They'll they'll do a myriad of other things. I just raised money for Mission 22. Which helps with veteran suicide. There are a myriad of things because it's viewed as a virtue, it's viewed as a value that people will take advantage of because they'll never get past that victim mentality that they developed in the military itself, right? Now I'll say military life stinks. It is absolutely terrible. As personal experience, there's very little that I would say was very good about my time in the military. I had my buddies, which I love and would still do, would go to war with, but not the military itself. And that's almost more of a trauma bonding than an actual, we had a ton in common kind of thing. But I just wanted to kind of voice my defense of Caleb Hammer on this issue, and tie it to the ills of the rest of society, the welfare state, even the poor financial state, the idea that in fact, let me talk about more of these that couple that was on there, their victimhood and their poor financial state is a direct reflection of their victimhood in the military and in the disability range, because they view themselves entitled. They view themselves as, well, I can get by by ignoring reality and by ignoring 1 + 1 = 2, because they think 1 + 1 can equal 3 if they just believe it hard enough and are I deserve this, therefore it equals 3, and that ends up being what happened. And honestly, that's what happens with a lot of people when they go into financial problems, is that they think they can get around reality by either ignoring it or by kind of justifying it through a twisting of virtue. Yeah, basically, it's a perversion. In fact, that's what a lot of evil is. Though you'll very rarely ever hear. Even Hitler justified his reasons. He perverted truth and into being twisting a reality of a seed of reality into a web of lies. And basically that's what he ended up doing, and that's what people do on a daily basis. I only mentioned Hitler because that's what people view as and especially in today's culture, as the pinnacle of evil, right? Without saying I'm doing the same thing, right? You just as easily can twist your reality and by justifying what you're doing as righteousness, and you can view your victimhood, your disability, your problem as a way of shading your downfalls and your sin, and you're falling short. And so, in fact, I talked about this with a couple of guys recently. Is that's what atheists do when they accuse Christians of being self-righteous? Is they accuse others of being self-righteous without taking on understanding that they'll at the same time are saying they're good because they don't need a God or the punishment to make them good. Well, that means that they're good by themselves, which means that they themselves are self-righteous. And so they're hiding behind a culture that says this is good, this is evil, and they're claiming it as their own, and without the steps or without the acknowledgement of who righteousness belongs to. And that ends up being what happens in every part of reality. Even Tolkien, one of my favorite authors, said evil can't create; it can only pervert and destroy. And that basically when that happens when we do anything and we hide behind a veil of they did bad, they did good, therefore I can hide behind the good and say that the others are evil, even though everybody at the base is evil, because we've all fallen short of God's perfect plan. Excuse me. So that's basically what I wanted to leave you with today. Is, as a veteran, be very careful that you're not hiding behind a veil of righteousness by hiding behind this romanticized view of the world and ignoring reality and having a very introspective point of view. That's really what I want to leave you with today. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of the Gap Fillers podcast. If you want to support me, you can subscribe on YouTube. That's the one I'm really trying to push right now. But you can also follow me on Spotify. Follow me on X at GapFillers1776, and on Florida Gap Fillers podcast on Facebook. Thank you, and have a good week.